War, economic disaster, and heartbreaking assassination have affected and changed Western society throughout the course of history. Some of the more well-known and significant disasters that changed the 20th century were the First World War, the Great Depression, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But before exploring how these events have affected the West, we will first take a look at Romanticism.
Romanticism was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement that started in the latter half of the 18th century in Europe and increased in strength in reaction to the Industrial Revolution. It was also a revolt against aristocratic social and political norms of the Age of Enlightenment.
These 5 major events have caused Western society to shift from Romanticism to pessimism, the tendency to see the worst aspect of things, or to believe the worst will happen.
June 28, 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated. This commenced what we know as the First World War. The First World War surpassed all previous wars in its death and destruction, with its death toll at an estimated 10 million.
Before the war, the Romantics of the Western world believed that man is essentially good. However, this war displayed man to be violent, brutal, and fundamentally evil.
An example of man's barbaric nature would be the cold-blooded killing of 1,198 men, women, and children aboard the passenger ship Lusitanian. On May 7, 1915, the German submarine U-20 sank this civilian and British supply-filled ship off of the coast of Ireland. Romanticists' belief in the goodness of man began to erode as they witnessed this horrific war kill their fathers, brothers, and sons.
During the Great War, the United States experienced a fantastic and growing economic state, but when the war ended, it presented a problem that would lead to yet another disaster.
At the end of World War I, the American soldiers returned from home. The need for a job became so challenging that it drove the United States into an economic disaster. This sudden downfall in employment left the nation a state of fear, poverty, and a sense of hopelessness.
All across the nation, people were experiencing extreme poverty that left thousands homeless and hungry. People were driven to grow their own food in order to survive. Because of the lack of income, people were not able to pay for necessities such as electricity, plumbing, and health care. Some Americans became so hopeless that they resorted to ending their own lives in order to escape this economic nightmare. The Great Depression was a time of hardship, sadness, and general unrest. It made life hard and created a gloomy atmosphere. This event severely dampened Romanticists' optimism in a good future.
Brother, can you spare a dime?
September 1st, 1939 began the deadliest war to ever occur in human history. When Germany invaded Poland, the Second Great War began. This war included almost every major country in the world. The two sides that were formed were the Allies and the Axis. This deadly and horrific conflict lasted 6 long years. This war resulted in a death toll between 60 and 70 million people.
During this war, man's cruel nature was revealed. A great example of this is the ruthless Holocaust that dictator Adolf Hitler orchestrated. He viewed the Jews as inferior to everyone else in his nation. It was his goal to eliminate as many of these Jews as possible. His solution was the installation of concentration camps. At these camps, Jews were worked to death, starved to death, experimented on, and slaughtered in gas chambers. By the end of the war, the Holocaust claimed approximately 6 million Jews.
By the end of World War II, the death toll was a staggering approximate of 70 million. Nearly two-thirds of these deaths were civilians. During the 6 years of this widespread war, more destruction and death was encountered than ever before. The romantic ideals, which had begun to struggle at the beginning of the 20th century, were fading rapidly with the onset of the Second World War. This third event was the end of the romantic idea that man was essentially good. The belief that man was good and perfectible seemed quite impossible in the face of such evils.
On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was on a political trip to Dallas, Texas, but a tragic shot to the head ended his life. This left the nation in a state of shock in the abruptness of this horrific event.
To romanticists, Kennedy represented the ideal image of their beliefs. However, when he was abruptly assassinated, so was the embodiment of their beliefs. This event dissolved differences among all the people, as they were all connected by one common theme: shock and sorrow. With Kennedy killed, so was the hopes of many Americans.
If Kennedy had survived, America's involvement in the Vietnam War would have been extremely different. He was getting ready to pull the troops out of the war, but unfortunately, he died before he could get Congress's cooperation. By killing Kennedy, many other American soldiers were killed and scorned by the people.
In 1965, America began its involvement in the most unpopular war to participate in, the Vietnam War. For America, this conflict lasted 16 long years. Their so-called purpose in this war was the attempt to keep communism out of southern Vietnam. But a huge majority of people in the U.S. were completely against this war and thought our involvement was completely unnecessary. Throughout the nation, there were rioters with various different picket signs revolting against the war.
Not only did this war greatly affect the people of America, but also the soldiers. During the war, troops were absolutely hated. Unlike today, where troops are welcomed back as heroes, the Vietnam soldiers were neglected, hated, and ridiculed when they returned home. Another way this war affected both citizens and troops was that the war introduced a new problem with illegal drugs. In the late 1970s, the use of heroin became such a problem that 10% of American GIs became regular heroin users. This penetration of drugs in the U.S. military also increased the drug rate in Australia. This problem with drugs was not only a problem then, but it opened a door that would affect America for years to come.
During this 16-year war, the American government lied about their activity in Southeast Asia. While the rules of warfare forbade Americans to fight anywhere besides Vietnam, they were found battling in Laos and Cambodia, two very off-limits countries. The result was the death of hundreds of innocent civilians. This finalized the transition from romanticism to pessimism. Man could not possibly be good, for he lacked even the fundamental of redeeming qualities. The hopeful, optimistic life that romanticism believed in was not present during these 5 crises. One catastrophe after another led to the ultimate eradication of romanticism, and pessimism readily took its place.